Hello, my name is Susan Sharman, and I'm the Marketing Director at the Marin Museum of Contemporary Art. This year, I had the great pleasure to curate our 12th annual Bay Area Legend exhibition featuring the work of Louise Stanley. Her show is titled No Regrets, 50 Years of Art and Activism. Spanning 5 decades from the 1970s to the present, it includes paintings and drawings, as well as a selection of her art journals and protest signs. The exhibit is on view from February 27th through April 18th and is open by appointment. You can schedule a visit on our website at marinmocha.org. I invite you now to meet Lulu, as she prefers to be called, and learn more about her art and inspirations. Hi, Lulu. How are you today?
I'm good.
Thanks for joining me. What inspired you to become an artist?
My dad was a painter, and our whole family made art. And I used to go with him every Sunday. The whole family would go out and paint. And he was a chemist by profession, but an artist all his life. And he taught me everything that I now teach my students. And I knew in the 4th grade I was going to be an artist. But I made the critical assessment that there was no magic in my mark. And I knew that I would have to tell stories, and the stories would move the paint. But it was not about the paint. It was mostly about what I was painting. Well, my dad introduced me to the regionalist painters, Thomas Hart Benton, Grant Wood, and Reginald Marsh. And their narratives seemed more useful to me, as opposed to the work that I was looking at the Huntington Museum. But I was embarrassed by their exposure, almost, or their work was so personal, and it came out in the paint, and they were each of them so openly, I can't think of the word, kind of naive. And I was embarrassed by that, but I strive for it now because I like the idea of doing kind of dopey paintings or monumentalizing a trivial situation. So that's one reason I juxtapose classical versus the quotidian, because Juno and Zeus make better copy than the neighbor's family squabble. And my parents never argued. And we used to sit at the window and listen to our neighbors fight, really battle it out. And we were just sort of in awe of that. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm sort of a voyeur. I'm curious about how other people live their lives. And the Greek Zeus especially was such a bad boy.
You received your BFA and MFA at the California College of the Arts. Can you tell me more about your time spent there?
Well, after I found College of Arts and Crafts, California College of Arts and Crafts, after getting a BA at a Brethren Church College in Southern California. And when I hit arts and crafts, my idea of painting and drawing was landscapes, still lifes, and nudes. And I could draw, but I was self-conscious because of my ability to do classical drawing. And so somewhere I found myself in graduate school, and 3 of my friends and I used to go to the Oakland graveyard after our seminars, and we decided we were going to do bad art, what we called bad art. And the idea was that we were trying to find our own voices. At the time at Arts and Crafts, and this was the late 60s, authenticity was the big deal, and your mark was sacred, and you had to have a personal mark that was your own. And for me, the only way to do that was to go back to the beginning and paint worser and badder, and find a kind of a personal way of talking about my world. And at the time, I was doing narrative painting. Actually, we chose to do narrative painting because it was a no-no. If you wanted to be a serious artist, you had to be an abstract expressionist. And basically, you couldn't use color, you couldn't tell a story, you couldn't use images. It had to be big, it had to be oil paint. And so the only way that we could rebel was to do tiny little intricate, compulsive, personal watercolors. And so we went to the graveyard, and we would pick a different plot each session, and we'd make rules up. We'd say, okay, put something in the middle of the page, take that George Post. Or we would put borders around the edge, and we go, take that Mrs. Posey. She was the design teacher. And so one by one, we were sort of killing off the father, if you want to say, or making inventing our own style. And for me, I started distorting the figure as a way to camouflage the people I was painting. And I found that with distortion, I could move toward an abstraction, but retain the flavor of that memory of the person I was painting.
After graduate school, you set your sights on your art and your art career. You've told me that you joined a women's movement in the early 70s. Tell me more about that and how that influenced what you did and the choices that you made as an artist.
Okay, well, when I got out of graduate school, and all of the women that I was in this women's group with were just getting out of graduate school, and we didn't know how to write a resume. We didn't know any of these things because we didn't go to the bar with the boys and the teacher after seminars. And when we graduated, most of the guys had already had galleries or were working toward shows, and we didn't. And the women's movement was there when we needed it. And so I was in a group of 9 women. We met for all artists, and we met for over 5 years, Wednesday night from 6:30 until 2 in the morning. And within 2 years, all of our husbands or boyfriends or lovers had left us for non-artist younger women. And basically, we started just bitching about our lives and our careers. And then a friend, now Joyce Kosloff, came from New York and said, "You're not doing this right. You need the list of the topics." And so then we started in earnest. And basically, we couldn't talk about art until we shared things like, how do you feel about friendship? What do you need from a friend? How do you feel about other women? Competition, jealousy, who does the housework in your, just nuts and bolts things about dealing with a career and with life. And there were a couple people in the group who had children, but most of us didn't have children. And I think that it reinforced the path I was always already on. And it gave me permission to talk about my own life and my experiences. And I never set out to do a kind of painting or a particular. I mean, I found the safest thing for me as an artist is to paint about my own life, and then they can't get you, because if you say it, they can't get you.
Right.
And I knew that if I was painting out of my own needs, I wouldn't be an ism that would be over, because I'm still living and I'm still evolving.
When did you embrace humor in your artwork?
Well, I haven't really embraced it. It happens.
Okay.
And I don't question it. And I've got two instances where I realized it was useful. When I was in art school, I wanted to do paintings people would gag and cry in front of and be moved
That's
by.
right.
And my first teaching job was at Humboldt State in 1973. And I walked by the faculty show one day, and there were two women guffawing, holding their sides and laughing in front of my painting.
Oh, no.
And I realized, okay, I can live with this. And then I had a solo show some years after, and a woman came up to a group of us at the opening, and she said, "These are not funny paintings. They remind me of junior high when I was miserable." And she dropped her glass and ran out of the gallery. And my friends went, "Way to go, Lulu." And then I started calling my work junior high realism.
Where did you go after junior high realism? How did your art evolve after that?
Well, when I started teaching, I realized I had to pull out all those classical things my dad had taught me. And I had to, of course, use them in my painting. And I was deathly afraid of becoming a photorealist, which was, I didn't want to go that far with realism. But the aha moment at the time was I realized I could use the distortion of my early figures and put them in real space with shadows and reflected light and all, and that I got kind of a double whammy. I got more of a tension with the contrast with the two, and I think the humor came about as a sort of an offshoot of the sort of laughing at, oh, look what I can get away with. And then I think that the cross-referencing with eras, I found I could talk about contemporary issues, but I never wanted to talk about what's going on right now. Like I would never draw, somebody asked me, well, why don't you put punks in your painting? Or and I found that if I go back a little further, like The Perfect Woman is my mother in the 40s, because that's when I was getting an idea of what a woman was. And so when you go back in time, historically, you have to go back further than 10 years. 10 years, it's sort of out of style. 20 years, it's retro. And earlier than that, it becomes archival or... and so I think the stylization came from looking at 40s clothes with the shoulder pads and the weird hairdos.
In 1989, you received a National Endowments for the Arts grant. What did you do with this, and how did it influence the direction of your art?
Well, I went to Europe for the first time, and I was pretty old to be going to Europe. And I went to a friend, Phil Linares, who had just been there. He was the chief curator at the Oakland Museum. And he made up a list of every place I was going where he had gone. And I didn't even know how to read a guidebook at the time. I just went with his list. And I started in England, and I went to France, I went to Spain, I went to Greece, and I went to Italy. And I realized when I was looking at all this art that I had done some pretty sophisticated looking at the Huntington Library when I was a kid. I had prepared for this. And one day I wrote 200 postcards home. What is the meaning of life? Why didn't I study art history? I am too small for this experience. And one day I was standing in front of Giotto's Death of St. Francis, and I realized I was home. That as long as I was drawing, paying homage to a painter, painting itself in my hotel room at night, copying the postcards, I was home and I was in good company. And I've always felt the idea of copying artwork or standing in front of a painting and drawing is a conversation you're having with your favorite dead artists. And going through the motions of doing that painting is a way of owning it for yourself and taking it home with you. And when I got home from that first trip, I built myself a Pompeian villa, and because I wanted one. And I made a statue of a Herm, and I started making papier-mâché Greek vases. And I kind of lived the fantasy of making something for myself that created the feeling of going back in time. And I don't really have to have the real thing, when I got my second NEA, I realized I could actually buy one of those vases with, of course, it'd probably be a fake, but with this money. But I realized if I made it with paper mache, I could pretend I was the Amasis painter or elbows out. And, that was enough of the experience of owning the work.
Tell me how you come up with your ideas and develop your compositions.
Well, my process, basically, to start with, is I'll see a reference of an art historical, a painting, a myth, or an homage to an artist, and I'll jot it down in my sketchbook. And I keep lists of idea pages, which painting ideas, and I've kept these over the years, 40 years or 50. And I referred to these with each sketchbook. I maybe 3 times during a sketchbook, I'll revise these ideas. So basically, I start with an idea and a sketch for it in my sketchbook, and then I'll do a small gouache. And then I realize it's worth enlarging, so I'll start a large canvas. And then halfway through the canvas, I get scared. It's either fear of success or fear of failure, but I go dead, and I have to do maybe an acrylic version on paper that's smaller. And then when I get my wits about me, then I go back to the large painting. When I finish the large painting, I'll do an etching or drawing. And usually if there are figures in the painting or the main protagonist, that person, as soon as it evolves, it stays the same with every version I make. I have made this being that keeps its personality. And my mother used to say, can't you make them cuter or prettier? And they emerge. That's how they happen. But each sketchbook, I start with a self-portrait. And this sketchbook is replacing a book that was stolen out of in Rome in the Borghese gardens. And I had to go. I was on my way to Florence, and so that's where I get my sketchbooks, in Florence. So this book is replacing a stolen sketchbook. And this image here is by Simone Martini, and it's the frontispiece. And Petrarch commissioned this in honor of the return of a stolen book. And so I'm sort of paying homage to it. But these are mostly, this is what I had to do in Volterra without a sketchbook before I got the book. And so most of the images are, here's the Boboli Gardens. And I stand in front of the paintings and in the museum and copy all the things in cases that I wish I could take home with me. And I can't break the glass. And this is, this is Orson Michel. And I like drawing in churches because they're really dark. I love drawing architecture. And then the stained glass is like candy in the dark. And so I think I could just draw my way through Europe.
What issues are top of mind for you right now with your artwork?
Well, I'm trying to be positive, and I'm very happy that I never put Trump in a painting because nobody would want it now. I reserve him for protest signs. But most of the images come really from what's happening to me right now in my own life. And it's hard to paint about life when you don't have one during the COVID.
Sure.
And I go back and forth with my idealists, hoping for a catalyst that something will click. I know I did the 20th century genre painting with the homeless man on the park bench when I was really, really broke and I had a big debt, and out my window were people pushing shopping carts. And I felt that was the next step for me. And I am now doing Flora, which is, my painting is a San Francisco version of the Realm of Flora by Tiepolo.
Do you have any words of wisdom for young artists?
Well, first of all...
Probably plenty, right?
Yeah. The procrastination that you do should be purposeful. And one reason I have so many sketchbooks is when I can't come up with an idea or don't feel like painting, I'll copy an old master or I'll work in my sketchbook. And it's one reason I have so many sketchbooks. And the other thing is I have students make to lists and line up their work and lock the door and make two lists. And one is all the things you do that you think you really are good at, that you'd sign your name to. And then make a list of the things that come up every single painting that you hate, that you can't stand, that you're really, it's like your brick walls. And I will bet you money that if you're still painting in 10 years, your paintings, if you're any good, will be about the bad list. Because those are the things that's you, that's who you are. Those are your handicaps that you have to learn to overcome and turn them into pluses. So say you want to be a colorist and you get mud. And every painting you get mud. Learn to make lyrical mud. Look at Bonnard, look at Voyard, look at people who really know how to make the mud sing. And the other thing is if you're a compulsive person and you get way tight into detail and you're always trying to loosen up, make it tighter, make it prissier, make it more uncomfortably compulsive, and you will own it, and people can't get you on it, But if you try to fix it up, it won't be authentic. It'll be somebody else's version of what you think you should be doing.
Excellent advice.
I have more.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Well, the one question I get from honest beginners is, when do I know when I get my style? And it's like, when is it going to be okay? Well, I don't tell them this, but it never is okay. But if you look at enough art, you start liking some and not others. And the more, and copying is a good thing, it's okay. But make 3 or 4 copies. And after the third one, you get rid of the artist, the other artist, and you become your own. And your work will start emerging. But you need to develop your own aesthetic for what you feel is work that you can relate to, or that seems comfortable to you. And it takes a long time. Some people figure it out really quickly. But it's like you ask your mother, well, how do I know when I fall in love? And she goes, you'll know when it happens. And it'll just be there. You'll just get lucky.
That's great. Lulu, thank you so much for your time today. It's been such a pleasure talking with you and learning about all of your history and your career and your inspirations and your stories. So thank you very much.
And I want to thank you, Susan, and Marin Mocha for honoring me with this show. And it's quite humbling.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.